Good morning. My name is Carmen Bills, and I am the Associate Curator and Outreach Director at the Nevada Museum of Art. We are pleased to welcome you to today's symposium, Through the Lens, honoring the architectural legacy of Paul Revere Williams. I would like to open today's program by acknowledging the traditional homelands of the Washishu, Washoe, Numu, Northern Paiute, Nawe, Western Shoshone, and Nuwu Southern Paiute people of the Great Basin. This includes the 27 tribal nations that exist as sovereign nations and continue as stewards of this land. We appreciate the opportunity to live and learn on these indigenous homelands. Today, we recognize the work of architect Paul Revere Williams as seen through the lens of photographer Janna Ireland. It has been my honor to curate the exhibition currently on view on the third floor of the museum, and to have the privilege and opportunity to work closely with Janna to share the legacy of Paul Revere Williams architecture, particularly in Nevada. I am so happy to share with all of you that the Nevada State Museum in Las Vegas has agreed to partner with us to host this exhibition in Southern Nevada in December, furthering the reach of this significant body of work. Before we start our program, I would like to also thank our sponsors. Major sponsors, the Jackie Foundation, Kim Sinatra and Family. Sponsors, Blanchard, Krasner and French, Angela and Mark Krasner, Nancy and Harvard Fennell, Dixon Realty, Christy Overgaard, Onaya, the Private Bank by Nevada State Bank, Sandy Raffelli, Bill Pierce Motors, the Phil and Jennifer Satre Family Fund at the Community Foundation of Western Nevada. Supporting sponsors, Kathy Bartlett, Tammy and Michael Dermody, Dr. Shonda and Julian Hardman, Envy Energy Foundation, Karen and Lance Tindler, the Thelma B. and Thomas P. Hart Foundation. Additional support, Friends of the Nevada State Museum Las Vegas, Nevada Humanities, Northern Nevada Regional MLS, Katie and O'Neill and Chris Gagne. Media sponsor is PBS Reno, and symposium sponsor is E.L. Cord Foundation. We are also thankful to our community partners who have brought enthusiasm and encouragement to this project. Our Story Incorporated, KME Architects, LGA Architects, the National Panhellenic Council, Las Vegas, the Neon Museum, Las Vegas, Historic Reno Preservation Society, Northern Nevada Black Cultural Awareness Society, and the Nevada State Museum, Las Vegas. Today's symposium will focus on the scholarship behind the exhibition and the practice and research of contemporary artist and educator Janna Ireland. Janna, we are so thankful for the work that you have done to reintroduce Paul R. Williams' work to new audiences, and we are extremely proud that the Nevada Museum of Art is home to your first solo museum exhibition. In 2021, the Nevada Museum of Art awarded Janna a research fellowship through the museum's Center for Art and Environment. Over the past year, I have had the honor of visiting all of Williams' buildings in Nevada alongside Janna. Everything from the Lear Theater in Reno to the Guardian Angel Cathedral in Las Vegas, and even the tiny towns of Lovelock and Dyer. Janna, it has been such an honor to help you realize this project and to help support your artistic endeavors and preparation for this exhibition. Today, we will hear from several scholars and curators who have made new discoveries through their research to elevate our knowledge of the trailblazing architect, Mr. Paul Revere Williams. A man who created over 3,000 works, during the course of his stellar 50-year career, leaving iconic treasures in California and Nevada for us to preserve, explore, and enjoy. To create this significant body of work, he developed strategies and tools to maneuver through racial barriers. This also doubled as fascinating sales techniques. His story starts in Los Angeles, California, and this important background will be presented by architectural historian Brooke Hodge, who will provide insight on the early part of his career in California. Mr. Williams was first introduced to the Silver State in 1934 with the commission of a luxurious home in Reno. And we will learn more about this work in northern and central Nevada and his mid-career accomplishments from Dr. Alicia Barber. Williams' story in southern Nevada is quite different. It starts in 1941, where he was introduced to southern Nevada by necessity during the war effort, where he created housing for African Americans during a period of segregation. This leads to the first middle-class African American suburb and iconic mid-century modern commercial structures that we can still view today. We will explore this phase of his life through a presentation by our spokesperson, UNLV Oral History Director, Ms. Claytee White. After a break, we will invite Daonne Huff, the Director of Programming and Engagement for the Studio Museum in Harlem, to interview contemporary artist and educator Janna Ireland. Through this conversation, we will get a glimpse into the process behind her photographic process and challenges and rewards involved with interpreting the work of such a renowned architect. To open the symposium, we would like to play a short documentary that was produced in collaboration with our longtime partners at PBS Reno. The film is also playing in the exhibition, but we thought we would share it with you today. Paul Revere Williams designed structures that everyone uses throughout their daily lives.
He goes beyond designing wonderful structures. He goes into designing communities.
The thing about his body of work is this extreme attention to detail. The quality is consistent.
Williams was really a master, not just at giving his clients everything that they wanted, but specifically tailoring his design so beautifully, whether that was a mansion in Beverly Hills or a ranch house in Nevada.
He put his ego aside to navigate through racial barriers to give everyone of every socioeconomic class the comfort of a home. I feel that every Nevadan should realize that Paul Revere Williams was a genius that stands the test of time. Paul Revere Williams was born in 1894 in Los Angeles, California. In 1919, he graduated from USC with an architectural engineering degree, becoming the first African American graduate of the university. In 1923, he joined the American Institute of Architects, becoming the first African American member of that institute. Some of the designs that he focused on are Mediterranean, Spanish, colonial, neoclassical, and after World War II, he focused more on mid-century modern. I'm Carmen Beals, and I am the curator of the exhibition Janna Ireland on the Architectural Legacy of Paul Revere Williams in Nevada. You will be able to understand the rich history of designs by Mr. Paul Revere Williams, and you will be able to see it through a unique lens of contemporary art developed by artist and educator Janna Ireland.
A lot of my work is about people, whether that is human relationships or the built environment. that people create for themselves.
She has this beautiful, profound way of capturing a linear design, something that's very signature of his piece, such as a curve or a window that has natural light beaming into a specific facility, followed by this gorgeous shadow that creates a rich moodiness.
For the exhibition, I came back to Las Vegas. I also visited Reno and some small cities outside of Reno.
Janna and I had the fabulous opportunity to visit each of these sites together.
For me, it was this really exciting opportunity to do this new body of work, to meet these new people, to learn about and really study another person who I wouldn't have thought to look into on my own, and to learn a lot about the field of architecture.
Paul Revere Williams began working in Nevada with his first project in 1934, which was a commission by Miss Luella Garvey.
Carmen and I showed up hoping to photograph the outside, and then we met someone who introduced us to someone else, and we were able to just photograph it on the spot, which is one of the wonderful surprises of working on this project.
Some of the characteristics of the Garvey residence include ironwork in its exterior. It has the beautiful signature staircases that Paul Revere Williams is known for. It has many large windows to capture the natural lighting, and it is a wonderful L-shaped property that is made in a colonial revival style.
I am very drawn to shadow. I'm drawn to the way light comes through a particular window at a particular time of day. I'm drawn to the way that the corners of a room might come together, or to things like the place between two rooms where you can see the flooring change from one kind to another. Just the seams of it, I think, are what I keep looking at. Rancho San Rafael was the first place that I visited in Reno. So my first morning there, I got into Carmen's car and we drove out there.
In 1936, Dr. Raphael Herman, his brother Norman Herman, and his brother's wife purchased 375 acres of land right outside of Reno. They immediately named it Rancho San Rafael. They were able to connect with Williams to commission him to design their property.
The Herman House is a really good example of how Williams was very precise in his architectural drawings of delineating very specific character-defining features. And that's found in everything from the curvature on the mantle to the pediments above the doorways, and even the specific design of the ironwork in the staircase.
Photographing in black and white really allows me to focus on the architecture and kind of strip out detail that I feel is extraneous, whether that is color or texture or furniture. It's just one way to zero in on what I'm really looking at. Another really neat set of properties that I photographed was the El Reno apartments.
Or in one of the El Reno apartments, which are actually self-contained homes, but they were treated as apartments when they were built in Reno in 1937. One of the things that makes these homes so unique is that they look from the outside like they're made of wood, when it's actually steel. These Lee steel homes came out of this philosophy that good architecture should be available to everyone.
The ones that we were able to visit are being used in really different ways, which is something that was really interesting to me. So there are some that are private homes, there are some that are kind of abandoned, nothing's really being done with, maybe they need some extra care. There was one that is sort of half museum, half office space. Another one is a restaurant. So it was fun to travel around the city and look at these different places and the way that the same architecture is just being used to do different things, and seeing the same architectural details repeat in these different contexts.
The first Church of Christ scientist is another Paul Revere Williams facility. Today, it's known as the Lear Theater. It's located downtown along the Truckee River. It has twin balustrades that lead up to a beautiful entry portico, and the facility is supported by 4 thin columns. As you go into the facility, it's 2 stories, and you can see his signature elements of bringing in natural light that bathes the walls. Janna and I went to visit Central Nevada, Circle L Ranch, the Tharp residence, along with the Lovelock Inn, which still stands today.
The experience of getting into the car and seeing this brand new landscape, trying to find Dyer, Nevada, this little town that I hadn't heard of before, and then having the opportunity to spend hours and hours wandering around this unfamiliar space, which is something that is exciting to me every time I get to do it.
Las Vegas was an area in the middle of the Mojave Desert. It was almost primitive in the beginning. Paul R. Williams comes here and is able to take a place like that and not just construct buildings in communities to house people, but he was able to construct buildings on the Las Vegas Strip. There are 2 places that Paul R. Williams designed that are just amazing. One is the La Concha Hotel lobby.
The building is a architectural style called Googie architecture, which is this really fascinating, jet-aged, sleek, futuristic style.
That lobby is amazing. It shows what Las Vegas can be. It shows what the future is of the Las Vegas Strip. There's also another thing that he did, and this is not just because it's so elegant, but because he did it for the African American community. Berkeley Square.
Berkeley Square is the first middle-class suburb of Las Vegas, and is located in the historic West Side, which is the community that was segregated and redlined for people of color to stay.
The 148 houses are 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom.
The homes are single-story homes, and they have low-pitched roofs.
And these were designed for middle-class Black Americans who didn't really have any development in the West Side community that they could really buy into.
I think this building that we're in right now, the Guardian Angel Cathedral, has been my favorite building to photograph in Southern Nevada. One thing that I really love about this building is the way that the art and the architecture feel so firmly integrated.
The stained glass and mosaics were designed by the Pixick sisters, Isabel and Edith Pixick.
My favorite window personally is the window directly behind me in the sanctuary on the south side. It shows casinos that were the neighbors of this building when this building was built. It's a threshold between what was, what is, and in the eyes of faith, what will be. And I think that speaks well of how architecture serves both the function that it needs to serve to be a worthy place for people to gather, but also forms its own identity as part of what it is in a living metaphor.
I am hoping that this exhibit is just going to blow your mind and just teach us something.
It's only by learning more about the incredible architecture of Williams in Nevada that we can gain more appreciation for that architecture, for its beauty, and for the momentous life of Paul Revere Williams and everything that he can teach us.
If you think about it, a lot of the designs that he has, they were so superior that they are still standing today, and we are still talking about them right now.
I hope that people see this as just kind of the tip of the iceberg, that it is a little tiny introduction to this enormous body of work that Paul Williams put out in his lifetime. I also hope that people understand it as my interpretation of the work. and that they realized that if they visited these spaces, they would see completely different things and have a completely different experience of the work.
Brooke Hodge is an independent curator and writer. She served as Director of Architecture and Design at Palm Springs Art Museum from 2016 to 2020. Prior to joining PSAM, Hodge served as Deputy Director at Cooper Hewitt Smithsonian Design Museum in New York City for 2 years. From 2010 to July 2014, she was Director of Exhibitions Management and Publications at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles. And from 2001 to 2009, she was Curator of Architecture and Design at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Los Angeles, where she organized major exhibitions on the work of architect Frank Gehry and car designer Jay Mays, as well as Skin and Bones, Parallel Practices in Fashion and Architecture, a groundbreaking thematic exhibition that examined the relationship between contemporary fashion and architecture. Holding a master's degree in architectural history from the University of Virginia, Hodge has written extensively about art, design, and architecture for the New York Times T magazine, as well as for other journals including Wallpaper, Metropolis, Pinup, Palm Springs Life, and Cultured. Please welcome Brooke, and she will be with us by Zoom.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Great. The story of Paul Revere Williams is punctuated by many firsts. That he was the first Black architect to practice west of the Mississippi is but one of them, and spans a career of 50 years, during which he built more than 3,000 buildings. Despite these and many other remarkable accomplishments, Williams and his work have been under-recognized. Architecture has been and largely remains an elitist profession that is predominantly white and male, with female and minority practitioners often overlooked. The exhibition of photographs of Williams's Nevada work by Janna Ireland, organized by the museum's associate curator, Carmen Beals, is surprisingly the first museum exhibition devoted to the work of Williams. I'm sorry I can't be with you in Reno this morning, but I'm grateful to Carmen and to Chief Curator Ann Wolf for inviting me to participate, and to Janna for her championing of Williams and for her evocative images. Karen E. Hudson was the first to bring her grandfather's story to a greater public in 1993 with the publication of the first monograph devoted to his work. As the director of his archive, Hudson was instrumental in its recent joint acquisition by the University of Southern California School of Architecture and the Getty Research Institute. This major acquisition will provide future generations with access to Williams's papers and drawings, leading to significant new scholarship on the architect and his work. In 2016, Janna was invited by the Julius Shulman Institute at Woodbury University in Burbank to photograph some of Williams's buildings. Ireland has recounted that she jumped at the chance, even though Williams's name was only vaguely familiar and my knowledge of architecture was limited. At its core, My work is about the expression of Black identity in American culture, and I felt an immediate connection to Williams's story. Ireland's photographs resulted in a 2017 exhibition and in the recent publication regarding Paul R. Williams, A Photographer's View. Her work to capture Williams' architecture is now an ongoing project. Paul R. Williams was born in LA to parents who had migrated there from Memphis in search of a better climate. He was orphaned in 1898, his parents having died of tuberculosis 2 years apart, and he and his brother were placed in separate foster homes. While not much is known about his foster parents, it's evident that they recognized the importance of a good education and strong community values. Williams was the only Black student in his class at Sentis Avenue School, where he sketched continuously and became known as the class artist. He first became interested in architecture when he made the acquaintance of a local builder who recognized his talent at drawing. In high school, he pursued his interest by enrolling in an architecture course and discovered that his abilities could perhaps be outweighed by his skin color when the teacher of his architecture course offered not encouragement, but a dose of reality by asking him, "Who ever heard of a Negro being an architect?" He was told that African Americans could not afford an architect and that white people would not hire him. However, Williams was nothing if not determined. And rather than giving in to discouragement, he took on the challenge and courageously decided to pursue his interest in architecture, despite the many societal obstacles in his way. Williams was strategic about his education. His foster parents had raised him to believe that he had to strive not only to excel, but to be better at his chosen field than everyone else, just so he could compete at the same level as his white colleagues. He understood that his expertise at drawing alone wouldn't be enough and set out to equip himself with all the skills he thought he would need to become an architect. He enrolled in the Beaux-Arts Institute of Design Atelier in LA to refine and expand his drawing skills. The initial exposure he received there to the architecture of Europe would prove to be influential throughout his career. After winning first prize in 1914 at the age of 20 for his design for a neighborhood civic center in Pasadena, he enrolled in architectural engineering at USC and became the university's first Black graduate in 1919. Over several years, Williams methodically pieced together an education that exposed him to all aspects of his chosen field, from landscape and interior design to engineering and city planning. To supplement what he was learning at USC, he attended evening classes at 5 different schools of architecture, each with a different approach. Williams deployed the same strategic thinking when seeking employment, consciously taking jobs to build his portfolio in different areas. During his initial job search, he was offered only low-paying positions as an office boy. Rather than being discouraged, he decided to accept a non-paying job with Wilbur D. Cook Jr. Cook's office had designed the master plan for the city of Beverly Hills and was recognized as one of LA's important architecture firms of that time. Cook was the first trained landscape architect and city planner to practice in the Los Angeles area. And in his firm, Williams would gain invaluable experience in those areas. His passion, drive, and talent impressed his employers during his first week on the job, and they offered him a small salary. Following his stint in Cook's office, Williams went to work for Reginald Davis Johnson to hone his skills in residential design. Johnson specialized in designing English and Mediterranean-style homes for wealthy clients in Montecito and Pasadena, where his practice was located. At these firms, Williams was not only exposed to different types of architecture, but also to the civic and community values of his employers. Rather than limiting himself to one arm of architectural practice, he strove to verse himself in all types of architecture to assemble the most expansive and complete portfolio possible. Having gained experience in landscape design, city planning, and residential architecture, he joined the firm of John C. Austin to add municipal, civic, and commercial work to his portfolio. Austin was one of the city's leading architects, designing some of its most notable buildings, including Los Angeles City Hall with John Parkinson and Albert C. Martin Sr., Griffith Observatory, and the Hollywood Masonic Temple. During Williams's 3 years with Austin, the firm designed and constructed more than 30 schools in the LA area. Williams also worked on several major civic and community projects, including the Shrine Auditorium, the Los Angeles Chamber of Commerce, and the First Methodist Church. In 1916, Williams had placed third in the prestigious National Architecture Competition and continued to enter competitions while working for Cook, Johnson, and Austin, winning 3 competitions in a row for the design of small homes. And here we see one of his entries from a 1916 competition, gave him the visibility and the confidence he needed to establish his own practice. And in 1922, after passing the state architecture exams and receiving his professional license, he opened an office in the Stock Exchange building in downtown Los Angeles. From the early 1920s to the early 1940s, post-gold rush and between the 2 world wars, as the Great Migration pushed westward, California was developing its modern identity. Hollywood as we know it today was born, and rural areas and wilderness gave way to cities and industry. 1920s Los Angeles was a boom town with a hunger for new and different kinds of buildings. Although it was an opportune time to launch an architectural practice, there were many challenges for Williams to overcome as a young Black architect. Large, well-established firms received the bulk of the city's commercial commissions, while most of the residential commissions were given to architects with social connections. However, working for Austin had not only provided the young architect with invaluable experience, but proved to be fortuitous in other ways, when in 1922, Austin passed along to him a $100,000 commission for a house in Hancock Park as a starter job. Since Williams had never been in a home that cost more than $10,000 to build, Austin sent him to Montecito to visit some of the large homes he had designed there. That Williams was a gentle, gracious man, well-liked by classmates, colleagues, and employers alike, is underscored not only by Austin's referral, but by a commission in 1922 from his former classmate, Louis Cass, who was one of the original underwriters of the Automobile Club of Southern California, to design his house in the new community of Flint Ridge. And here we see 2 views of the Cass estate or the Cass residence on the left when it was just completed, and on the right as it appears today. In addition to these 2 projects, Williams had obtained over half a dozen residential commissions, including 3 other homes in Flint Ridge and 1 in West Los Angeles by the time he opened his own office. The home Williams designed for Cass was in the English Tudor style, complete with stucco and half timbering, and was characteristic of the architect's early designs, which were traditional in nature. Williams knew that he couldn't rely solely on his talent and became adept at networking and establishing social and business connections. Many of Williams's early clients came to him on the recommendation of his former employers, while others learned about him from a 2-part 1923 article in California Southland about the John B. Brown House in the Los Feliz neighborhood of Los Angeles. The article, which referred to Williams as a rising young architect, reveals that Brown, on the recommendation of the real estate editor of the LA Times, approached the architect with ideas about the house he wanted to build on a hilltop site. Like the Cass house, the Brown house was English in style and featured an artful yet functional floor plan. By the end of the 1920s, Williams had established himself as a skillful, sophisticated designer of homes for the upper middle class and the wealthy, which were mainly located in what were then suburbs of LA, including Flint Ridge, Beverly Hills, the Pacific Palisades, and Pasadena. And here we see the Rosetta home in Los Feliz, which dates to about the same time as the John B. Brown house. It's more of a Spanish-style home with red tile roofs, white stucco facade, and an arched covered porch on the upper level. The view to the swimming pool and the interior, which we'll see later, is quite typical of a Williams interior, with the beam ceilings left exposed and the arched window openings, with the windows set very low to the floor. The influence of both the residential work of his former employer Johnson and of buildings he had been exposed to in his drawing classes at the Beaux-Arts Institute is evident in these early projects. Most of his clients wanted large homes, and Williams took inspiration from the manor houses of the English countryside and the chateaux of France. While the massing and the materials he used, stucco, brick, stone, and half timbering, are drawn from these European precedents, Williams frequently stripped away extraneous details on both exterior and interior, creating a simplified, more modern version of the traditional styles of the past. He was also sensitive to his clients' desire for privacy and sited his homes back from the street, with landscaped lawns and gardens in front. The rear facades of his buildings were more open and featured larger windows than the main facades, and he often introduced splayed floor plans that embraced gardens and pools and provided the indoor-outdoor living that had become an integral part of the California lifestyle. Williams was talented at introducing light into interiors by using clear stories, French doors, and large windows that sat low to the floor. While his homes were large, they were never ostentatious, and his elegant interiors featured gracious entry halls that accommodated and welcomed the guests his clients would be entertaining. Williams accentuated his spacious foyers with what would become one of his signature design elements: a graceful curved staircase leading to the second floor. It is remarkable that at a relatively young age, Williams was designing homes that were so refined and resolved. There was a lot of money and a lot of land in LA in the pre-war years, and Williams's architect peers were also receiving commissions for homes in the growing city's affluent neighborhoods. Here we see two homes in the Hancock Park neighborhood of LA, designed by Williams in the mid to late 20s. However, unlike his peers, Williams was designing homes for neighborhoods in which he, a Black man, could not live. The mid-city neighborhood of Hancock Park was established in the 1920s. And although Williams received a series of commissions there, due to a restrictive covenant, like those governing other areas at the time, he couldn't have built his own home there. It is striking that these wealthy clients engaged a Black architect during this period, and the renowned architectural historian David Gebhardt has suggested that they sought him out not only because they admired his work, but possibly because hiring him would demonstrate their liberal values and support of racial equality. Ingelil Walrus Ritter, a Los Angeles architect and former dean of the architecture school at Woodbury University, has pointed out that, quote, "It was the nonconformist strain of Hollywood, filled with creative, self-made people willing to take risks, that opened the door for Williams's career," unquote. Wesley Howard Henderson, who wrote his 1992 UCLA dissertation on Williams, posits that the architect's self-made clients related to him because he was also self-made. One such client was the actor Lon Chaney Sr., known as the Man of 1,000 Faces. Chaney commissioned Williams to design two projects. The first was a cabin in the John Muir Wilderness outside Big Pine, California, seen here and constructed from 1929 to 1930. And the second was a large home in Beverly Hills for him and his second wife, Hazel, in 1930. Here we see the Beverly Hills home. The Beverly Hills house, which hasn't been written about, but which I was fortunate enough to visit, is a rectangular volume clad in whitewashed brick. Set back from the street, a red brick walkway steps up a gentle hill to the front door, which is inset in a pared down neoclassical stone frame. Williams employed other abstracted or stripped down neoclassical details on the home's facade, including a frieze that runs the length of the main volume, delineating the home's 2 stories. Although the home is large, Williams's use of white painted brick, capped by a red tile roof, lends it an air of modesty, as do his simplified details. The home's entry hall, which has arched openings supported by Corinthian columns, is the grandest space in the house. Yet, as was typical with the architect's work, it is neither ostentatious nor showy. The dark paneled wood floor and beam ceiling give it an almost rustic feeling. One of Williams's beautiful staircases leads to the 2nd floor. Cheney was a very private man, and he asked Williams to design a library office for him off the entry hall. The room is cocoon-like, with hand-carved wood paneling wrapping around it. The fireplace, capped by a triangular copper hood, adds to the cozy yet masculine feeling of the room. Because the house was built during Prohibition, Williams designed a bookcase that slides open to reveal a bar. Sadly, Cheney passed away just before the home was completed, and his widow was so grief-stricken that she put it up for sale immediately. This is a view into the living room, again through an arched opening. And you can see, again, the windows that are set low to the floor, allowing a lot of light into the room, as well as the beam ceilings. And most of Williams's living rooms were reached by stepping down a few stairs, which gave that sort of entry procession more of a feeling for guests visiting the home. Here are 2 other views of the house where you can see Williams deploying the use of arched openings. On the left is the arched opening over the tub in the primary bathroom, which has a backlit mural instead of a window to the side on one side of it. And then the arched porte cochere on the left of the house on the right-hand side. Fortunately, this beautiful home, and it should be noted that Williams referred to all of his residential buildings as homes rather than houses, has a happy ending. In 1976, a young couple with several children moved into the house. Growing up there had a great impact on one of their daughters, who was 10 years old when her parents bought the house. As an adult, she knew that she wanted to live there again. And when the house came on the market, she and her husband were able to buy it. They have since undertaken a major renovation, restoring the home's original detailing, including replicating the wood paneling in the library, locating and restoring the fireplace's copper hood to its rightful place, and stripping paint from the entry hall's elegant columns. In a stroke of good luck or genius, her mother had left the home's original plans in a secret closet in the living room. Entrepreneurial types, of which there were many in Los Angeles at the time, also gravitated to Williams when they needed an architect. E.L. Cord, an auto magnate whose company manufactured the Duesenberg, commissioned Williams to design a 32,000 square foot home in Beverly Hills in 1930, seen here. Williams also designed Cord's ranch house in the Fish Lake Valley in Nevada. Over time, the architect designed more than 300 homes and businesses in Beverly Hills. Early clients returned for larger homes or commercial buildings, and the growth of Williams's practice paralleled the fast-paced growth of Los Angeles. In 1932, 90% of Williams's work was residential, but by 1940, commercial projects accounted for 60% of his work. Here, unfortunately, is the Cord estate being demolished in 1963. Because he was working with white clients, Williams developed several strategies to ensure that neither he nor they would be made uncomfortable when they were together. Most notably, he learned to draw upside down. This unusual skill enabled him to sketch ideas out for his clients who, because the norms of the day dictated that they not sit next to a Black man, sat opposite him. Not only was this a useful tool for Williams, but his clients found it most impressive. While on construction sites, Williams helped put clients and contractors at ease by walking with his hands clasped behind his back so that they wouldn't be put in the awkward situation of wondering whether they should shake hands with him. While Williams developed these strategies, and here we see him pointing out details on a model to a client who's facing the model, While Williams developed these strategies out of necessity as a Black man operating in a white man's world, they also demonstrate his sensitivity toward his clients, which was perhaps a greater factor in his success as an architect than any other attribute or skill he possessed. Williams founded his practice on an approach that was client-driven and strongly believed that his success and value depended upon listening carefully to his clients and giving them what they wanted. He had to work without ego and could adapt to meet each client's needs and demands. His respect for his clients, coupled with a shrewd business sense, meant that his practice was not limited in terms of either its range of clients or its projects. In the late 1930s and early 1940s, before World War II, Williams received some of his most important non-residential commissions, including the Music Corporation of America building, 1937, seen here, which he often cited as his favorite building, Saks Fifth Avenue in Beverly Hills, 1939, seen here, and the Arrowhead Springs Hotel, 1940. Over the course of his long career, Williams would design several more hotels, including the new Crescent Wing of the Beverly Hills Hotel from 1947 to 1951. The Crescent Wing, an elevated and undulating pink volume, signaled a major shift from the original hotel's Mediterranean style to an informal and sensuous modernism that came to define post-war California luxury. In addition to the Crescent Wing, he revamped the famous Polo Lounge, where you can see the glamour of the Beverly Hills Hotel. And it should be noted that apparently Williams also designed the font for the hotel, which is still used today. And in his honor, the hotel has named one of its best suites after him, the Paul R. Williams Suite. In addition to the Crescent Wing, he revamped the famous Polo Lounge, seen here, to recapture the hotel's early glamour. And he designed the Fountain Coffee Room on the hotel's lower level. The coffee shop's curvaceous counter, echoed by the curved lighting soffit above and complemented by palm leaf wallpaper, imbued it with an elegance and glamour that was most definitely Californian in style. Indeed, the hotel remains one of the most iconic buildings in LA. In 1948, Williams and his former employee, architect A. Quincy Jones, completely redesigned the Palm Springs Tennis Club. Situated tight against a mountainside, the two architects fused architecture with nature by nestling the building into the difficult site's natural topography, even using the natural rock formations for the rear wall of the building, which you can see in the right-hand slide. Early photographs of the tennis club, which has since been remodeled, unfortunately, show an elegant modern building with elevated terraces for sunbathing and socializing. In the center of the main room was a chalet-like open fireplace surrounded by built-in circular seating. Williams and Jones worked together on several other projects in Palm Springs, including the Town and Country Plaza, seen here, an early mixed-use project in downtown Palm Springs that is the subject of a lengthy preservation battle. Williams had been appointed to the Los Angeles Planning Commission in 1920, and as his practice flourished and his office expanded, he devoted more time and energy to community service. He served on the city's planning commission for many years, sat on the boards of other organizations, and was appointed to state commissions, including the California Housing Commission and the California Redevelopment Commission, as well as to numerous national or presidential commissions. Since education had been such an important cornerstone of his own career, Williams also lent his support to historically Black universities and served on many of their boards. As Janna Ireland has pointed out, Williams believed that everyone deserved a dignified place to live, and his work on public housing projects was another way he could serve others. With Hilliard Robinson in 1936, he designed Langston Terrace in Washington, D.C., the first federally funded public housing project. In 1943, he was appointed the chief architect of the Pueblo del Rio Defense Housing Project in Southeast LA, and worked with a team of other notable architects, including Adrian Wilson, Welton Beckett, and Richard Neutra, on the design of the 17.5-acre project that provided 400 units for 1,350 people. Pueblo del Rio was the only one of the 15 public housing projects that had been built in LA by that time that was planned to be open to African Americans. Williams also designed Nickerson Gardens. Oops. Sorry, I don't have a good photo of Nickerson Gardens. Williams also designed Nickerson Gardens in the Watts neighborhood of LA from 1950 to 55. With 1,066 townhouse-style units, it is the largest public housing project west of the Mississippi, and was named after William Nickerson Jr., the founder and former CEO of the Golden State Mutual Life Insurance Company, once the largest Black-owned insurance company in the Western United States. Williams was also the architect of the insurance company's headquarters in LA's West Adams neighborhood, which was completed in 1949, several years after its founder had passed away. The striking building is now the headquarters of the South Central Los Angeles Regional Center. In 1951, Williams finally realized his dream of building a home for himself and his wife Della in Lafayette Square, an upper middle class neighborhood in West Central LA that had slowly begun to open up to African Americans. Planned as an elegant residential park in 1913, by the 1930s, the neighborhood included an eclectic mix of large homes in the American Craftsman and various European revival styles popular at the time. As the white upper middle class began to move to more desirable areas on the west side of LA, including Beverly Hills, Brentwood, and Bel Air, and restrictive covenants were lifted, a small contingent of middle and upper middle class African Americans began to buy houses in the area, and Williams was able to secure one of the few vacant plots of land. Unlike the traditionalist homes requested by his clients, the architect's own home was much more modern in style. The international style 4-bedroom home features clean lines, a curved volume with ribbon windows, and a striking cantilevered deck on the second story. The flat roof has a deep overhang, providing shade for the deck. The home's open floor plan includes an elegant staircase leading to the second floor. Here's another view where you can see the curved volume on the right-hand side of the house with its clear story below the overhanging deck. The home's open floor plan includes an elegant staircase leading to the second floor, stone floors, curved walls, a striking ceiling with a honeycomb pattern, built-in seating, and numerous glass doors that open the house to the secluded garden behind. Williams lived in the home until his death in 1980, after which it was occupied by his granddaughter, Karen Hudson, seen here. The home came on the market for the first time in 2017, and its new owners have embarked on a significant renovation to restore it to its original condition. Paul R. Williams was much sought after in his lifetime, but his work has not received the same attention as the modernist houses that have become synonymous with Los Angeles. While he designed his own home in the international style, he was often criticized for not fully embracing that innovative style in his practice. Los Angeles is a city that is always in search of the newest thing, and although Williams's buildings are beloved by their owners, they likely seem traditional, old-fashioned, and staid in comparison to the experimental avant-garde projects of other architects, including Rudolf Schindler, Richard Neutra, Pierre Koenig, and Frank Lloyd Wright. However, the architecture of Paul R. Williams is an enduring and important chapter in the story of Los Angeles. And in the city's nascent years, his gracious buildings indelibly shaped its architectural landscape. Williams went on to design numerous public and commercial buildings, many of them still standing around the city, although he never received a commission for a skyscraper. Very well regarded by his fellow architects, in 1960, he joined William Herrera, Charles Luckman, and Welton Beckett in a joint venture office responsible for the planning and design for the entire Los Angeles International Airport project. The project greatly expanded the airport and resulted in modern buildings that celebrated almost 5 decades of growth for the municipal airport. In 1965, the celebrated photographer Julius Shulman photographed Williams in front of the airport's futuristic space-age theme pavilion. Here we see Shulman's famous photograph. The striking image led to the popularly held belief, still recounted today, that Williams had designed the building, while in fact it was the work of Pereira and Luckman and not part of the joint venture. As the Paul Revere Williams archive becomes accessible and more of his buildings are saved from demolition and restored to their former glory, the fact that he accomplished so much and did so with such amazing grace will remain an inspiration for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Brooke Hodge, for your wonderful research. We appreciate all that you have done to contribute to this project. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Alicia Barber to the stage. Alicia Barber is a professional public historian, writer, and educator specializing in the cultural landscapes and built environment of Nevada and the American West. Both independently and through her firm, Stories in Place, she partners with local, state, and federal agencies, museums, libraries, educational institutions, community groups, and others on projects ranging from oral histories and architectural research to exhibits and installations to websites, including Reno Historical, illuminating Reno's divorce industry, and the 4th Street Prater Way History Project. Platforms for her research, analysis, and storytelling include the feature Time and Place with Alicia Barber for KUNR Public Radio, the C-SPAN City Tour, and her regular newsletter, The Barber Brief. The author of Reno's Big Gamble, Image and Reputation in the Biggest Little City, Dr. Barber holds a PhD in American Studies from the University of Texas at Austin. From 2003 to 2013, she taught U.S., Nevada, and public history and directed the University of Nevada Oral History Program at the University of Nevada, Reno. Her accolades includes awards from the American Planning Association and the National Council for Public History. In 2014, she received her Silver Pen Award from the Nevada Writers Hall of Fame. Please welcome Alicia Barber.
Is it just here? Okay. Just getting instruction on forwarding slides. Well, thank you so much. I'm delighted to be here. To share some of my research as context for some of Janna's just beautiful photographs. It's been such a pleasure to work with the museum over the course of the last year and more to delve more deeply into the work of Paul Revere Williams in the state of Nevada. I was asked to research his work in northern and central Nevada. And so my first goal as a researcher was first to clarify precisely what he had designed. Which actually led to a few revelations, and for whom. And there were some revelations about that too, which I'll get to. A second goal was really to explore how his work in Nevada fits in with his larger body of work. What can his work in Nevada tell us about the state of Nevada? And what can it tell us about Williams? Lastly, was his Nevada work similar to work he had done previously elsewhere, or did it represent something new? And at least for central and northern Nevada, the answer is a little bit of both. Williams' projects in this region took place over a 15-year period from the mid-1930s to late 1940s, and they included 4 private residences, a church, and a motor lodge. Additionally, his designs for small manufactured steel homes were used for a project in Reno, and he worked on some initial drawings for a rehabilitation center that was not constructed. They appeared in Reno, Dyer, and Lovelock, as you've heard, starting with Reno in 1934. So the first natural question is, why Nevada, and specifically why Reno? This is downtown Reno in the 1930s. Reno may at first seem an unlikely place for Williams to have designed anything. By 1934, Williams was a renowned and highly successful architect in the Los Angeles area, a city of more than 1 million people. In contrast, Reno in 1934 was a small town just 4 square miles in size, with a population of around 20,000. Even so, it was the largest community in Nevada at a time when Las Vegas had fewer than 6,000 residents. Despite its size, Reno was already a major national destination, known as the biggest little city in the world, a slogan that was adopted in 1929 and captured the city's unique mix of cosmopolitanism and small-town charm. Here it is on the famous Reno Arch, which was erected downtown in 1926. The city had achieved national fame, some might say notoriety, for an array of attractions made possible by the state's permissive legislation. And in the years of the Great Depression, state leaders were doing everything they could to keep visitation up to secure Nevada's economic stability. Since 1905, Reno had been known as a migratory divorce colony. These are some illustrations from magazines on the cover of Life magazine a little later in 1939. People could travel, establish residence in Reno, and benefit from the state's efficient divorce statutes. The initial residency period had been 6 months, which the state legislature shortened to 3 months in 1927, and an unheard of 6 weeks in 1931. That same year, the state of Nevada permanently legalized wide-open gambling, the first state in the 20th century to do so. Small clubs soon appeared throughout Reno's downtown and in other communities throughout the state. This is the Owl Club. There was, in particular, a strong and growing connection between California and Reno in the 1930s, particularly Southern California, for a number of reasons. One was the divorce industry, which many Los Angeles socialites and Hollywood celebrities had personally benefited from. Another connection was the entertainment industry as a whole. Hollywood had taken on Reno as a subject from the earliest days of silent film. It offered so many possible plots and characters, settings for drama or comedy. 3 Reno-themed films appeared in 1931 alone. The setting was just well suited for any kind of adaptation. In addition, many wealthy Southern Californians were not just visiting Reno, but establishing residences there due to its favorable tax laws, particularly the lack of income or inheritance tax. In the 1940s, these features were officially packaged into the One Sound State campaign, depicting Nevada as a tax haven, a safe and stable place to stash your cash. Lured by the state's fiscal benefits, millionaires, including Max C. Fleischman, Wilbur D. May, LaVere Redfield, and E.L. Cord, established residences in Nevada in the 1930s, with many also retaining residences elsewhere, an arrangement particularly appealing to wealthy Californians due to the proximity to the state of Nevada. Although few brought new businesses with them, many would leave behind bequests and charitable foundations that enabled the establishment, construction, and expansion of institutions, schools, services, nonprofits, and museums with an impact that continues to this day. So with all of these factors, it is perhaps not surprising that it was wealthy residents of Southern California, specifically Beverly Hills, who first brought Paul Revere Williams to Nevada. Reno did have many accomplished architects of its own at the time, and they were designing residences of all sizes, including spacious and elegant homes in the city's most affluent neighborhoods. But Williams' clients may have been skeptical of hiring any of them, or simply found it easier to hire someone they were already familiar with. And it's also quite probable that they made most of their arrangements for the design of the projects he designed in California. Precisely what led them to hire Williams in particular isn't known outside of E.L. Cord, who had prior experience working with him. It seems safe to assume that they wanted to bring an architect with them who was not just reputable, but renowned, who could lend their Nevada projects not just expertise, but prestige. The houses themselves bear many similarities to each other and share many features from some of his earlier residential work. Although Williams was a master of multiple styles in residential architecture, including Spanish colonial revival, Italian revival, Tudor revival, French provincial, French Normandy, and more, the Nevada homes do not represent a single identifiable style. They do share a similar aesthetic, a similar roof form. Even when multi-level, they represent horizontally. There are colonial and classical revival elements with Georgian and French Regency influences, and frequently his signature ornamental ironwork. They are elegant, but not exceptionally grand or ornate. They are spacious and comfortable. The reason for that is in part contextual. Only one of these commissioned houses was located within a city's limits when designed. The others were all on spacious property in rural contexts. The houses therefore reflect those contexts, their clients, and the reasons that their clients came to the region. The tax advantages were certainly one reason, but not always the only reason. The first residence was for Luella Rhodes Garvey. She was the widow of a wealthy steel magnate, Clayton Garvey, who had died in Pasadena, where they lived, in 1925. What drew her to Reno in the first place had been unknown until quite recently. In 1934, Garvey was a 60-year-old woman of substantial wealth. At her death in 1942, her estate was valued at $3.5 million, the largest ever to be filed in Nevada, and the equivalent of $60 million in today's dollars. Less than a year after her first husband's death, she married a man named William Shoup. One account called him a cowboy from Seattle, but the match didn't take. And in 1927, Garvey arrived in Reno to file for divorce. And I have here the articles from the newspaper are both, there were very few, it was very hard to track this down, but one mention of her marriage and another of the divorce suit. And then you can see some images from the house that she commissioned Williams to design for her. Because as sometimes happened with new divorcees, Garvey did not leave Nevada for good after receiving her divorce, instead splitting her time between Los Angeles and Reno for the next few years. In 1934, Garvey hired Paul Revere Williams to design her a house on the corner of California and Nixon Avenues, just east of the row of lavish mansions adorning Newlands Heights. Why Williams? It's quite likely she personally knew some of his other clients, several of whom lived near her former home in Pasadena. And she was free to hire whichever architect she wanted, since architects did not need licenses to practice in Nevada until the creation of the state's Board of Architecture in 1949. This is the most visually ornate of Williams' Nevada houses, which makes sense since it was on Reno's most fashionable street. The house was actually designed as a duplex, one half of which was occupied by Mrs. Garvey's attorney and friend, Edward Lunsford, and his family. Garvey never married again, and she died actually pretty soon in 1942, and the house is now occupied by a commercial tenant. It was the first in the state of Nevada to have been designed by a professional African-American architect. And I want to take a minute to recognize what an astonishing accomplishment that was, considering how few African-Americans lived in the state in 1934. We don't know, according to the 1930 US Census, of Reno's 18,529 residents, and this is in 1930, only 123 were African-American. In the state as a whole in 1930, which had a total population of just over 90,000, only 516 were African American, a percentage of fewer than 0.6%. And this is a table actually from a project that we worked on for the State Historic Preservation Office a couple years ago to do a historic context for the state about African Americans in Nevada and the Civil Rights era in particular. So these statistics are compiled, and this is a report that's available that really tries to provide more context for understanding the communities and accomplishments of African Americans in the state, and particularly looking at the built environment and how we can preserve that legacy. So it really shows you the total population from the years 1900 to 1940 here of African Americans in the state from about 134 in 1900 to 664 in 1940. We don't know if Williams had any contact with Reno's African American community in conjunction with the design of Garvey's house or any of his projects. That community, although small, was close-knit and largely centered on the Bethel AME Church, which was founded in 1907. Some members of its congregation can be seen in this photo on the right, which is actually the cast of a play called Ethiopia at the Bar of Justice that was performed at their church on Bell Street, still there, on May 22nd, 1935, the year after Garvey's home was completed. That building is actually listed in the National Register of Historic Places. Racial discrimination was increasingly embedded in the city's housing market, where racially restricted covenants were imposed upon many of the subdivisions established after the mid-1920s, covenants that explicitly prohibited any non-white residents from either purchasing or renting homes in them. Although Williams designed many homes in restricted neighborhoods elsewhere, the Reno tract of Rio Vista Heights, where Garvey had purchased her property, was not one of them. But it is notable that no one of African American heritage lived in any of Williams' northern and central Nevada residences. This is actually a restrictive covenant from my own neighborhood in Reno, Country Club, from 1931. Williams' second Nevada commission was for members of the Herman family: Raphael Herman, his brother Norman B. Herman, and Norman's wife, Mariana. Like Garvey, they were most recently from Southern California, and unlike her, they continued to have large homes there where they lived for most of the year. The Hermans were all immigrants, the two brothers from Germany and Mariana from an area of Austria-Hungary, now defined as Croatia. Raphael was the best known of the three. He was a manufacturing executive and philanthropist. He was best known as the donor of a $25,000 World Peace Prize, and he's in the middle of the photo up on the top left when the prize was being given. Norman, in the 1930s, on the right, was working as a real estate broker and developer in Hollywood and Beverly Hills, and this is the only photograph that I've been able to find of him during that era. Mariana, and this I believe is new information because I had not seen it reported elsewhere and took a bit of digging, was an actress in numerous silent films who had apparently gotten her first break by passing herself off as an Austrian countess. And this article actually on the bottom called Pedigree Peddlers is from Motion Picture Magazine in 1921, and it actually talks about numerous actors and actresses in that period who had gotten their first break in the movies because they had basically said, they had lied and said that they were royalty from another country, mostly Europeans. She married Norman Herman in 1927 and retired from acting, but she actually is in the credits of several different silent films. She changed her name. Her name had been Mariana Devkich, but she called herself Lola May, Mariana Moya. She had a couple different names. So it's a lot of fun history, and actually I'll be talking a lot more about her and the Hermans at a talk that I'm doing that you can go to at the Herman residence in August. Mariana said years later that Nevada's gorgeous blue skies experienced on a sightseeing trip through the state had inspired the three to purchase the sprawling Jensen Ranch outside of Reno, although surely the state's tax advantages had something to do with it as well. Being in the real estate business in Beverly Hills and Hollywood, you can see one of his ads here on the left, Norman very likely had prior contact with Williams and is named as the client on the plans he completed for the Hermans in February of 1936. And here at the top right is Williams on the ranch, and it's one of the few, maybe the only photograph that I've seen of Williams in northern Nevada. And I think these are the caretakers, and I believe Mariana, they're standing with him. The location of the ranch, like I said, was out of town. You can get a sense of its location here on the northwest edge of town at the time, outside of city limits. Here in the foreground is the University of Nevada. This is from around the same period of time, 1940, and then up to the top right is where you can see where that sprawling ranch is. So it was outside of any existing subdivisions at the time. These are from the original drawings for the Herman residence, and you can really see such detail. And as has been pointed out, the attention to windows, very well-placed windows and very large windows, and in many cases extended all the way to the floor. So many of his signature elements being present here that are seen in his other northern and central Nevada work, and also in his work in Southern California. This is the house today. It hugs the landscape and was the centerpiece for what remained a working ranch for decades and is now right by the Arboretum. So it's a really lovely setting today. The beautiful outdoor patio features decorative ironwork by local ironworker Andrew Giannacchio, who had also done some work for the Garvey House. Raphael Herman did not have many years to spend on the ranch, despite being its namesake, we believe, the romanticized version of Raphael, being Rancho San Rafael. They named it after him. He died in 1946 and Norman in 1960. Mariana later sold the ranch, which opened as a county regional park in 1982. The house is now available to rent for special events. Several years earlier, Williams had won the commission for E.L. Cord's massive mansion in Beverly Hills, 32,000 square foot home completed in 1933, where Cord lived with his second wife, Virginia Tharp, a young socialite from Louisiana. The house had gained Williams national exposure, and it seems natural that Cord would have turned to him for additional projects. And this is a photograph of Cord and his wife, who got married sort of secretly, kind of rapidly, so there were a lot of sort of breathless reports of the fact that he'd gotten married again. By 1929, Cord controlled over 150 companies, and in 1936, he purchased some gold and silver mining properties in the Silver Peak district in Nevada's rural Esmeralda County, about 70 miles west of Tonopah. In June of 1940, Cord purchased the expansive Malini Ranch in the Fish Lake Valley west of Silver Peak, that's just outside the small community of Dyer. This explains why he was there, and named it the Circle L Ranch. His purchase of the working ranch, which comprised 2,200 acres and included 440 herd of cattle, enabled Cord to establish his official state residency in Nevada with all the tax advantages that conferred. And this is him in Virginia at the ranch on the top right, and that's the house at the bottom right. Lots and lots of reports of Cord's mining adventures in Nevada, which was a very, very big deal. The purchase was not just for tax purposes. This truly was a refuge for the Cord family, who retained their huge mansion in Beverly Hills. Cord was said to have been extremely anxious about the prospect of a Japanese attack on the West Coast, and moved his family to live at the Dyer Ranch full-time in 1942, stocking the house's cellar and an adjacent warehouse with household staples. 3 daughters he shared with Virginia, who was known as Gigi, Sally, Nancy, and Susan, were all under the age of 10. And you can actually see their growth charts in the house still. According to author Griffith Borgeson, Williams visited the ranch in the summer of 1940 and quickly produced plans for the entire compound, including the main house, barns, bunkhouse, warehouse, and sheds. The family continued to vacation at the ranch for decades after the Cords moved back to Beverly Hills after the war, and then to Reno, where they had a custom house built in the mid-1950s, and where Mrs. Cord often socialized with Mariana Herman when both were in town. And actually, later manager of the ranch said they liked to go down to Harris and Gamble together. The last of the 4 private residences, the Tharp Brinkerhoff house, is also connected to E.L. Cord, who we believe arranged for Williams to design 2 properties in the small town of Lovelock, Nevada, for Cord's brother-in-law, William A. Tharp, and his family. If the Cord ranch house was a refuge, the Tharp house seems to, in some respects, to have been a hideaway. The Tharps had a rather notorious past, which I also had not seen reported before, and there had actually been reports that the Tharp residence was connected to E.L. Cord through another relative, and also that they were from Indiana, which turns out not to have been the case. The Tharps had moved to Nevada, seemingly connected to a desire to essentially start a new life, from what I can tell. And this was all, as I say, sort of new information that is easily gathered now because of digitized historical records. The fact that we have digitized historical newspapers from across the country, we have digitized recorder's office documents, including property deeds. This is all an exciting development that allows us to learn more and more and more that we hadn't before. William Tharp was the brother of Cord's wife, Virginia, and their family was originally from Shreveport, Louisiana, as was William's wife, the former Alice Lee Grosjean. In fact, Alex herself was a rather notorious figure back in their home state. In 1928, while still a teenager, she was hired by Louisiana Governor Huey Long, heard of him, as his private secretary, and soon became one of his closest and most trusted associates, and by some accounts, his mistress. At the time of Grosjean's marriage to William Tharp in 1934, both were working for the Louisiana state government, Alice as the supervisor of public funds, William as secretary of the state tax commission. Scandals and investigations swept through the highest levels of Louisiana state government for the next few years. Huey Long was assassinated in 1935. The Tharps were both fired by Governor Richard W. Letch in 1939, and Alice was summoned to testify in a series of investigations related to various powerful figures in the state. By 1941, the Tharps had a daughter, Linda, and were running a motor lodge outside of Baton Rouge. By 1946, they were living in Lovelock, Nevada. The house that Williams designed for them has a lot of similarities to the Cord's house at their Dyer Ranch. Reno was small in the 30s and 40s, but Lovelock was tiny, with a population about 1,500. But it was located along US 40, which made it a perfect location for a motor lodge to attract the increasing numbers of auto tourists making their way across the state. It's downtown Lovelock. Williams was well practiced in designing for the hospitality business, recognizing the need to create environments tailored to a lodging's unique context and intended feel, as he had accomplished at the Miramonte Hotel and Deep Well Guest Ranch in Palm Springs. The Lovelock Inn was built for $260,000 and opened in the spring of 1949 with 33 units, managed by the Tharps. Built from Nevada stone, mined near Carson City, its air-conditioned interior fully embraced the inspiration of the American West, with walls, ceilings, doors, and cornices of knotty pine, rocky maple, and wormwood. And this is actually a notification in Nevada Magazine that the inn would be opening soon. Here's the inn today. The Lovelock House appeared to have been the Tharps' permanent and only home until they moved back to Louisiana in the 1970s. The house and motor lodge are now under private ownership. The last group of residences Williams designed in the region were what we refer to today as the El Reno Apartments. Unlike the others, these were not designed on site for a client, and it's unlikely Williams ever visited Reno in conjunction with them. In 1936, Williams designed 2 houses for the illustrious California House and Garden exhibition. One was a 3-room steel house, which employed modern materials in such a way as to look traditional. From a distance, the steel walls looked like wood, and the interior wall treatment suggested painted wood paneling. The use of steel in home construction had been experimented with since 1890. It had proven to be too expensive for the average home buyer, however, until the Los Angeles company W.C. Lee Incorporated invented and patented new processes for manufacturing prefabricated steel components that could be shipped to any location and constructed on site. The company employed Williams as their consulting architect, and you can see some similar features from his architecture in these little manufactured steel homes, including the decorative grillwork. In a July 1936 LA Times advertisement, Paul Williams declared, "If you can buy a home of any kind, you can buy a Lee Steel home." Reno resident Roland Giroux turned 15 of the small houses into a complex of small, detached apartments, offering them for rent at 1307 South Virginia Street, between Arroyo and Pueblo Streets. It's where statewide lighting is now, on what was then the edge of town. His intent was to attract Reno's transient workforce, tourists, and the ubiquitous divorce seekers. The El Reno apartments were popular through World War II, after which a raise in the rent forced tenants to find other lodgings. Within a few years, the complex was no longer sustainable, according to Giroux, the owner, and the units were sold off individually. Most were moved to other locations around town. The little houses have retained their distinctive bay windows, and most remain in Reno, some in better condition than others. In fact, the 2 shown here on the bottom right don't look like that anymore. They are actually in pretty bad shape on Lander Street, so we are hoping to maybe draw more attention to their significance. We've learned more quite recently about how Williams became associated with the Christian Science congregation in Reno thanks to research conducted by Mello Rothwell Harmon and a member of the Loomis family, Just Loomis, who lives in Los Angeles. In particular, they located a handwritten history of the church's construction in the church's administrative archives in Reno, which was very, very exciting. And actually, the information led to a revision and addition to the National Register nomination for the First Church of Christ Scientists, what we know as the Lear Theater. The information actually changes our understanding of who was responsible for the site selection and for major funding of the church. In particular, we've learned that the person who made it possible for the congregation to both purchase the site and fund the construction was, in fact, Luella Garvey, who we knew was involved, but not quite to what extent or in what role. In January 4th, 1937, Luella Garvey made a gift of $15,000 toward construction of the church, and later an additional $25,500, allowing the church to pay for the parcel that they purchased on Riverside Drive on the north bank of the Truckee River. It's reported that by some that she was actually a student of Christian Science herself, and by others that she was looking for a congregation to support, and it just happened to be the lucky recipient. Anna Franston Loomis, the building committee chairperson, used lessons from Mary Baker Eddy's teachings, as well as biblical accounts of the building of Solomon's Temple, to aid the committee's identification of the features and elements they wanted for their new church. The building committee interviewed 4 architects: Arguin Officer of Berkeley, California, Williams from Los Angeles, and Russell Mills and Lehman Ferris, both of Reno. and the committee unanimously selected Williams. And these are some photographs, or these are some newspaper articles from the time about both the selection of Williams and a rendering of what it would look like, and then the church under construction. It was very, very heavily reported in the papers, and it always mentioned Williams. The elegantly serene neoclassical revival church opened to the public on October 22nd, 1939, having cost around $140,000. The interior features several Williams signatures, large windows on the east and west walls that bathe the nave in natural light, and an encompassing attention to detail, expressed perhaps most charmingly in the wire hat racks that are found on the underside of each of the approximately 600 seats. Separate rooms offered space for childcare, readers, and singers, as well as lodging for the building's caretaker and Sunday school classes held in the basement. Upon her death in 1942, Luella Garvey left the congregation a trust fund of $100,000 to support the building's maintenance. By the time the congregation moved to a new building in 1998, discussions had been underway for many years to convert the church into a theater. A $1.1 million donation from Moya Lear gave the planned legs and the building a new name, the Lear Theater, which still graces it today. However, the theater project languished after many years, and the building, which is listed in the city and state historic registers, as well as the National Register of Historic Places, was donated by Lear Theater, Inc. in 2011 to the local nonprofit arts organization Art Town, which sold it to the city of Reno in the fall of 2021. Here's the interior. So the fate of this building sort of remains to be seen. Now owned publicly, there are no specific plans yet for what happens next, and that's the status where we are right now, is hoping to have some conversations with the city, with the community, to really have that be a community project as we move forward together. In 1942, Williams partnered with a frequent collaborator, fellow Los Angeles-based architect Adrian Wilson, on a series of drawings for a proposed rehabilitation center at the Steamboat Hot Springs south of Reno. The project itself was entirely speculative from what we can tell, possibly connected to a larger effort to secure major financing to develop the springs into a world-class resort. The geothermal springs had been the site of various sanitariums, hospitals, and accommodations since 1861. That's before Nevada statehood and even before it was a territory. In 1941, the Reno Chamber of Commerce proposed developing and expanding the resort into a major health spa. And Dr. Edna Carver, who owned the resort, wrote up a formal prospectus for what she called a Washoe Valley Spa at Steamboat Springs, which included an image you see here labeled the Washoe Valley Spa Hotel on the bottom left. Entirely speculative, it's just in the brochure. It seemed like to try to inspire people to get excited to, make it happen, apparently. We don't know if Williams' drawings were created in response to this or for some other reason entirely. This is a site plan that accompanied his drawing, found in the archives of the American Institute of Architects by Stephen Keelan. It depicts a sprawling campus, including a fully equipped modern multi-story rehabilitation center, groups of cottages, a bathhouse, educational and recreational buildings, an outpatient clinic, and a guest inn and restaurant, but no casino, which actually had been pitched by Cardner was to have a casino, and he didn't have a casino. Whatever reason, perhaps the ongoing American engagement in World War II, the desired financing for a resort expansion never transpired, and Carver continued to operate Steamboat Springs in a fairly modest manner until her death in 1954. The Steamboat Hot Springs remains operating under private ownership today as a therapeutic spa and was listed in the Nevada Register of Historic Places in 1998. Lastly, I want to say just a quick word about another residential project that has been long attributed to Williams, the Loomis Manor Apartments on Riverside Drive in Reno. The claim that the apartment building was designed by Williams was first published by Christine Palmer in an article she wrote for the Nevada Historical Society Quarterly in 1993, after speaking with the grandson of Anna Frenston Loomis. Here on the left, remember, she was deeply involved in the First Church of Christ Scientists. She was the head of the building committee. And so Palmer had spoken with his grandson, her grandson, Lynn Johnson. It has been repeated many times elsewhere, including on the Paul Revere Williams Project website, which is largely considered definitive source, and in other references to Williams' work. So I really wanted to take this on very thoughtfully and carefully, and in conversation with the Loomis family. So I've had a great deal of discussions with Just Loomis over the last year, trying to really ascertain, because unlike the other projects, there were no drawings. There was nothing concrete. And so there were also some competing claims for having designed the building. So in the absence of those drawings, it renders a final determination impossible, but two factors seem to rule Williams out. One is the media coverage of the time. Although the apartment's construction was featured in the local newspapers several times, none of the articles linked the building to Williams. And that alone is curious, as he would likely have been hired for his cachet as well as his talents, and his name always appeared in print in association with his other Nevada projects, including the nearby church, and years earlier with Llewellyn Garvey's home. What's more, a lavish two-page spread accompanying the building's grand opening in May of 1939 specifically attributed both the building's design and construction to contractor Walker Bodwin. I say his name wrong. What is it? Bodwin? Bodwin. Thank you. Locals know. At the time, he had on staff an architect named Edward Parsons. Parsons went on to have an illustrious career throughout Reno. Parsons himself claims credit for the design in an oral history he recorded for the University of Nevada Oral History Program in 1983. So after kind of sharing our research and discussing it extensively with Just Loomis, he agreed that it seems unlikely that Williams was actually the architect of the building. So I wanted to explain that because many people do attribute Loomis Manor, and it is not in the exhibit. But I wanted to talk about it in my essay. As I wrote in my essay for the exhibit's website, so this is a smaller version of a longer essay. It was about twice as long as I was supposed to write, but I couldn't stop. But it is on the website that the museum has actually just launched, where you can read essays and longer versions and much more information about this material. But I wrote there that to explore the work of Paul Revere Williams in northern and central Nevada is not only to gain insight into the remarkable breadth of his creative range, but to open a window into a transformational era in the state's history. The fact that these buildings remain on our landscape today is a testament to their enduring beauty, and I believe this exhibit provides the opportunity for us to spread even more awareness of them, of him, of their significance, and can help lead to the appreciation and, in some cases, the rehabilitation that they all deserve. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alicia Barber, for your scholarship on Williams in northern and central Nevada. Next, I would like to invite Claytee White, spokesperson and director of oral history for UNLV, to the stage. Claytee White is the inaugural director of the Oral History Research Center for the University of Nevada, Las Vegas Libraries. She collects the history of Las Vegas and the surrounding area by gathering memories of events and experiences from longtime residents. Her projects include early health care in the city, history of the John S. Park neighborhood, the Boyer Early Las Vegas Oral History Project, and a study of musicians who played with some of the greats in the entertainment field. As one of 5 founders of the Las Vegas Black Historical Society Incorporated, she chronicles the history of the Las Vegas Black community that was established in 1905. Her published writings on the subject include a book chapter, encyclopedia entries, and several articles. White received her bachelor's degree from California State University, Los Angeles, master's degree in history from University of Nevada, Las Vegas, and has completed work towards a doctorate at the College of William and Mary. White also serves on the board of Women of Diversity, the Historic Preservation Commission, and the Mob Museum Board of Directors. Please welcome Ms. Claytee White.
Oh, just a bit. Alicia's a little taller than I am. So I want you to just stand up for a second. Just stand up and just just do this. Okay, nobody leaves the room, just, okay, now sit down. Okay, good. All right. All right. Oh, it must feel good. You don't want to sit down. Okay. All right, it's wonderful to be here today. In the southern part of the state, Paul R. Williams was very prolific as well. And we are going to go through just a few of the things that he designed for Southern Nevada. I am going to be using Las Vegas. Not everything was in Las Vegas, but that's what you know, so that's what I'm going to use. So in addition to the luxurious that we've been seeing, we know that Paul R. Williams also had this small house concept, and he began to use some of that type of designing during World War II, and that's when he is introduced to Southern Nevada. So when the war starts, when World War II begins, Basic Magnesium Incorporated, Black workers began to migrate into the area in great numbers, and they're coming from small towns in the South, places like Fordyce, Arkansas, Tallulah, Louisiana, and small places in Mississippi. They need housing. And Paul R. Williams, as his war work, begins to design places through the federal government. And one of the first places that he designs is Carver Park. Carver Park is the housing for Basic Magnesium Incorporated that processes the magnesium used to build bombs, bullets, guns, airplanes to be used in the war. Germany already had that technology. The United States was behind, and they had to find the ideal place so that this manganese ore could be processed. Henderson, today you know it as Henderson. That is where Basic Magnesium Incorporated was constructed, and now they had to find two housing developments. They had to design two developments, one for the Black workers, one for the white workers. Paul R. Williams was commissioned to design Carver Park for the Black workers. And you can see the curvature on the buildings. Unlike other very, very inexpensive designs, a lot of windows, a lot of light into the building, and this is what we see for migrants coming from small towns in the South, just like Paul Williams' family had come from Tennessee. He wanted places where blacks could live that were not so much elegant, but so different from the places they had lived in these small towns in the South. And therefore, we have Carver Park. We have several photographs of this at UNLV, but this is the one that I love best. So when they came here from the small towns, they were traveling across country, and these are the units that he designed. 64 units for single males, 104 one-bedroom units, 104 two-bedroom units, and this is where they lived. Unfortunately, this housing wasn't ready until 1943. By 1943, a lot of the Black men who worked there had to find housing earlier than that, and they went to the West Side community close to downtown. And that West Side community today we call the historic West Side. And if you're ever in Las Vegas, I will take you on a tour. So he didn't just design houses like this for Las Vegas. He also designed, we thought at one time that there was going to be a successful racetrack in Las Vegas. It wasn't so successful, but they needed the cachet of a great architect. And one of those architects was Paul R. Williams, that designed the Jockey Club for this racetrack. Joseph Smoot, whose project this was was not the most upstanding individual that you can imagine. And I don't want you to just associate that with Las Vegas, okay? He just wasn't that upstanding. So the 60-day race period that this elegant jockey club with all of the graceful designs, this was supposed to be a 60-day race season. It turned out to only last for 13 days. So this project did not really last for very long. It was only used for that very, very short period, and then it was divided and is now part of our country club, Las Vegas Country Club, our convention center, and the West Gate, which at that time was the International. So that gives you an idea where that property was. So Paul Williams designed a lot of homes for African Americans. In 1949, after designing Carver Park in the early 1940s, he designed another, on paper, designed another project, and it was called the West Project. But this one did not materialize until the mid-50s, and it became Berkeley Square. Berkeley Square is still there today. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. And because of that nomination report, we now know that Berkeley Square was not the only part of this development, that Berkeley Square, the 148 homes, also included a second addition called Highland Square. How did we learn about Highland Square? Yes, it was mentioned in this nomination report, but a woman in the African American community just a couple of months ago took me to this area called Highland Park, and she drove me around, and she said, "What does this look like?" I said, "Berkeley Square." She said, "That's right." And we find today, Carmen has found that it is actually the second portion of this design. It had low-pitched roofs. It had an interior planning that was very functional, very open. It was designed as if you could add to it later on, and that was his idea. Every house had an open carport. There was a lush lawn in the front and a strip dividing the sidewalk from the street where you could have plants. So he used this area to build community. One of the first people who lived in this community was Esther Langston. Esther Langston talks about community. She was married to an Air Force man, and this African American man would talk about how other men, when they would leave town for assignments, they were stationed someplace else, all of the other husbands on those blocks would make sure that his area, his yard, was kept up on a Saturday morning as they were doing the lawns for their homes. So she said it was the epitome of community, and we think this is what Paul Williams had in mind. Just like in Los Angeles, Paul Williams had a commercial phase in Las Vegas as well. He didn't just do homes that were his small house designs. He also did commercial properties. His first commercial property was the Royal Nevada Hotel Casino. The Royal Nevada has a crown on top, designed by Paul R. Williams. This design brought attention, but this is one of the hotels that opened in 1955. In 1955, we had a downturn in the economy. This hotel suffered at that time, but it was helped to survive by the Stardust. We also had a problem at that time with the Dunes, the Riviera. All of them went through a downturn in the economy, and all of them were helped by by other casinos on the Las Vegas Strip. Side note, this was also the year that we had the first integrated hotel casino called the Moulin Rouge. It perished in that downturn in the economy. It was not helped by anyone else. There was a family in Las Vegas called the Daonne family. The Daonne family had a connection with USC. One of the sons in the family had met Paul Williams at USC. And when the family got ready to build property on the Las Vegas Strip, continuing that legacy of Paul Williams, they invited Williams here to design 2 properties for the family. The first property was the La Concha. The La Concha, I think, is one of the most iconic. Yes, the cathedral is probably the second most. That is Janna's favorite one. Probably the second most iconic. But this is the one that today you can see that futuristic idea, and we look at that and we see the future of Las Vegas. This is a property that is unrestrained. That's what Las Vegas is. We are unrestrained. It is one of the best preserved examples of the Googie style of architecture. It is named after a community in Spain, and that's why the family wanted Paul R. Williams to do this work. And I'm not gonna talk about the cathedral, the next building that he planned, only because you saw so much about it this morning, and you're gonna talk about it again probably in a few minutes. But you know how iconic this building is with the stained glass windows. It was a confluence of people coming together, of ideas, of concepts. The one thing I want to add to the discussion of the cathedral is that it was commissioned because Mo Dalitz knew Paul R. Williams. Mo Dalitz is a Jewish mogul who builds a Catholic cathedral. He was the one at the Stardust. He wanted a location that was close for his workers, and he wanted something to help redeem his reputation. So he calls Paul R. Williams, and this is what Paul R. Williams does. The family that commissioned the La Concha also commissioned another building, and this was the El Morocco. So we weren't sure that the El Morocco was a part of Paul R. Williams's work. But in Las Vegas, because our city is such a small community, I just got on the telephone and I tried to call, I found a website, and then I sent an email to the family, and it was answered. The Daonne family, Lorenzo Daonne, answered my email. He said, Paul R. Williams did indeed design the El Morocco in the early 1960s for my family. The Daonne family plans to open a new resort in about 2023, and they will be using the influence of the La Concha and the El Morocco and what they're going to do next for our great city. But that's how small our city is, and he has also promised to sit for an interview, so I can't wait. I would like to end with a project that was not designed. This is the Skylift Magna Cab. It was doomed, unfortunately, by our devotion to the single-family car. This was going to be one of those exciting monorails that would take you from the downtown area, not the Strip, but all the way downtown, from downtown to the airport. And we were not successful. It was only on paper that Paul R. Williams designed this wonderful monorail. Now, some of you may know that we have a monorail today. Yeah, yes, not that sure? Our monorail today does not look like this, but it gives you the same kind of feel. Kind of, maybe someone looked at this when they designed our monorail. I'm not really sure, but this was never designed. Paul R. Williams did not leave that kind of impression on our city. But Paul R. Williams was that architect that said, without having a wish to show them, I developed a fierce desire to show myself. And along the way, he showed the world. I thank you.
Thank you, Claytee, for your wonderful history on Williams in Southern Nevada. Mr. Williams remained nimble, introducing new techniques of architecture until his retirement in 1973. Williams died in 1980 at the age of 85. His granddaughter, Karen E. Hudson, the former director of Williams Archive, states, "Architecture alone does not define her grandfather. Above anything else, he was always a gentleman, and he was always a gentleman with a dream." Nearly 4 decades after Williams' death, the AIA named him the first African-American recipient of the gold medal. The Institute cited his portfolio of nearly 3,000 buildings and his lasting influence on the theory and practice of architecture. As Claytee mentioned, we are still learning of new structures that Williams created in Nevada. In 2020, the Getty Research Institute and the University of Southern California acquired Williams Archives. Many scholars had believed they had been completely lost in a fire during an LA riot in 1992. Given this, we know that there may be new discoveries about Williams' work in the state of Nevada when they release these archives for public viewing. At this time, we will pause and take a 15-minute break. Please feel free to refresh your coffee and stretch your legs. Thank you. Okay, so at this time, we'll go ahead and start the program. And we'll move on to the final presentation of the day. I would like to introduce Daonne Huff as she interviews Janna Ireland. Will you both please join me on stage? Daonne Huff is an arts administrator, performance center artist, curator, and poet who was born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama. She is Director of Public Programs and Community Engagement at the Studio Museum in Harlem. For more than 15 years, she has worked with institutions and organizations including the Department of Art and Design, Mason Gross School of the Arts, Rutgers University, Groundswell, the Bronx Museum of the Arts, the Laundromat Project, and the Myrtle Avenue Brooklyn Partnership. She holds a BA in Art History from Vassar College and an MA in Visual Arts Administration with a nonprofit concentration from New York University. Throughout her professional career, Daonne has focused on working with nonprofit arts organizations dedicated to increasing arts accessibility to a wider, more diversified audience and advocating for the support and necessity of creative expression and arts education within a society at large. I would also like to welcome Janna to the stage and formally introduce you to her. Artist and educator Janna Ireland often uses herself and her loved ones in personal and editorial work that explores family life. In recent years, Ireland's practice expanded to include architectural photography. In 2016, she was invited by architect Barber, executive director of the Julia Shulman Institute in Los Angeles, to photograph structures in Southern California designed by the African-American architect Paul R. Williams. In 2020, Ireland's photographs were reproduced in a monograph titled Paul R. Williams, A Photographer's View, published by Angel City Press. The book was shortlisted for the 2020 Paris Photo Aperture Foundation First Photo Book Award. Ireland was born in Philadelphia and currently resides in Los Angeles. She received an MFA from the University of California, Los Angeles, and a BFA from New York University. Her work has been featured in solo and group exhibitions across the United States and internationally. And her work is in the permanent collections of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, the California African American Museum, and the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. Her photographs have been published in Aperture, The New Yorker, Harper's, the Los Angeles Times, the Architectural Digest, the Wall Street Journal, and the New York Times Magazine. Please join me in welcoming both Janna and Daonne.
Testing. Great. Hi. I'd like to first off thank the entire Nevada Museum of Art team for inviting me to be a part of this incredibly important, timely, poignant, and eye-opening exhibition of art history, of Black history, of architectural history, and Nevada history. And before we really get underway, I named this program, or our conversation, a meditation of sorts, and in brackets, on house and home. And I'd like to offer some definitions to further ground us in a space and a place. House, according to Merriam-Webster, a building that serves as living quarters for one or a few families, a shelter or refuge, a natural covering that encloses and protects, a building in which something is sheltered or stored. Home, one's place of residence, the social unit formed by a family living together, a familiar or usual setting, congenial environment, the focus of one's domestic attention, a place of origin, one's own country. And then lastly, architecture, the art or science of building, the art or practice of designing and building structures, and especially habitable ones, formation or construction resulting from, or as if from a conscious act, a unifying or coherent form or structure, product or work, a method or style of building. And before I ask my questions to Janna, would everyone in the room be willing to embark on a little visual exercise with me? Great, look at this. Get outside in New York City and people are like, yes, let's participate. I'm going to say words affiliated with Paul R. Williams, with Janna Ireland's photographs, and more broadly, spaces we encounter. And I want you to close your eyes or keep them open and visualize images that come to mind. House, home, yard, porch, window, staircase, corner, molding, doorway, light fixture, ceiling. You can open your eyes now. And I would imagine that everyone in this room, even if they live in the same structure, visualize something different. And I think the genius and the care work of the architect Paul Revere Williams is that every structure he created, he made unique and distinct to the needs and visions of his clients, but also gave the residents the space to further customize and personalize them to truly make them their home. A house, a home, a structure is a charged space that holds unique stories and lives and memories and intentions based on whomever witnesses it or crosses its threshold. No two people remember the same details of a space. And the beauty of this exhibition is that it is a conversation between two people across time of how they each construct spaces for others to inhabit and interpret and form their own relationship to their respective creations. So to warm us up, Janna, what came to mind for you with that prompt?
What came to mind for me with your beautiful prompt is the house that I live in now. My family and I moved in December, and it is the first place I have felt at home since I was about 11 years old. So I'm thinking of this wonderful place that my husband and I are working on for our children. When you talk about that, even though I made all of those photographs that inspired the prompt, I don't think about them at all.
I love it, I love it. And so first question, it's all in the details for Janna and definitely for Paul Revere Williams. And the slides that I'm showing you, it's a poetic kind of curation of the images that are in this exhibition. So think about how we're starting from this really micro details level, and we'll kind of evolve and open them up over the course of the conversation. So in thinking about the details, how did this project change your ways of looking, seeing, entering, and engaging with spaces?
When I began this project, I hadn't really photographed architecture in a serious way. I was mostly making photographs of people, and there were places where architecture was kind of creeping in. There was a project that I did about my neighborhood when I lived in graduate school, which was West Hollywood, which is a small city in Los Angeles. And I made these photographs of the neighborhood thinking about it as a project about West Hollywood, but not thinking about it as a project about architecture. And at the same time I was making that work, I was making work at my husband's grandfather's house in the San Fernando Valley outside of LA. And I was photographing myself at this house, but I was also doing a lot of photographing the house itself. And when I was asked to begin making pictures about Paul Revere Williams, at the beginning I sort of thought, I don't photograph architecture, how will I do this? This is not what I do. But when I actually looked back through the work that I made, I could see an interest in architecture. And what I had to do was figure out how to look at it really deliberately, and also how to talk about architecture, how to look for particular details, how to talk about architectural styles, all things that I'm learning. But embarking on this project meant figuring out how to go into an unfamiliar space and find things that are particularly interesting to me, find these details that if you ever look at Williams's plans that he drew, you'll see that he drew everything. He thought of everything. He was thinking of every curve in the banister, every corner of every room is there on paper. And my concept for this project was to find those details, and through looking at those details and putting them all together in one place, kind of building a portrait of him as an architect and the different things that he was able to do.
Thank you. And connecting to that, at the end of the PBS documentary, it ends with you saying, this is my interpretation of Paul Revere Williams, and that if someone else documented his structures, it would offer a different interpretation. So what about, and what you kind of started to lay the foundation in your response, what about your practice and creative process prior to starting this project influenced your approach? And what do you hope your distinctive imprint will be on how we look and experience Williams's designs, structures moving forward?
I have a difficult relationship to the idea of my eye. I want the work to be honoring him, but it's impossible to separate the way I look at things, the way I photograph things from this work that I'm doing. So when I talk about it, it's always like, well, I don't want to be imposing my own ideas on it, but I can't help it. So
That's
so I
the
have
role
to-
of the artist.
Yeah, that's so I want to make sure that his ideas are coming through, but then also figure out how to talk about the way that I'm looking at it and the way that I am experiencing it and the particular things that I'm interested in when I go into these places. So that's sort of a.
Oh, we're gonna go
Okay.
deeper. We're gonna come back.
Okay.
Because there are other So this is a disclaimer. I feel like we're almost at noon, so it feels appropriate. It's not cocktail hour, but I'm a romantic who uses popular culture to explain what I don't always have the words to express. And this is even more apropos given the richness and tenderness of what Janna has captured. So to quote noted songwriter Burt Bacharach, as covered by Dionne Warwick and later Luther Vandross, a chair is still a chair, even when there's no one sitting there. But a chair is not a house, and a house is not a home when there's no one there to hold you tight. A room is still a room, oh, even when there's nothing there but gloom. But a room is not a house, and a house is not a home when the two of us are far apart, and one of us has a broken heart. And so I'm thinking about, how do you approach creating a photograph as a portrait-centered artist to feel as if a body was present, even when they're not within the photograph? Or asked another way, how do you help the viewer feel situated within a photograph so they can feel like they exist within it? And then one more step, is there any longing to this work, to connect?
To answer the last part first, I think there's absolutely a longing to connect, and maybe that is me longing to connect with Williams. And thinking about the first part, when I am making these pictures, I'm thinking very deliberately about my body and my perspective. So these aren't photographs that are made from a drone. These are photographs that are made with the camera set at my height, usually maybe a little bit lower, maybe a little bit higher, but almost always I set the tripod so that it's right at my eye level, and made usually with the lens set to 50 millimeters, which is a 50 millimeter lens is the closest to what we see, to human perspective, rather than wider or narrower than what we see. So I'm very deliberately trying to make these photographs that are at my height and that are set up the way that a person would actually see something if they were standing a particular distance from something. So I want, so my body is always there in the work. And when other people look at the work, I don't know how to talk about other people's experience of the work, but what I hope is that it contributes to a feeling of maybe being there, even though, of course, they're in black and white, which means you're not experiencing them the way you actually would if you were there. So maybe it's more like a memory of a place than actually experiencing it.
No, I love that. I feel like I want to jump because that memory is, we're gonna hop around and I'll come back to this other question. So there's something about black and white photography that exists as simultaneously timeless and nostalgic. And to quote the incredible photographer Roy DeCarava, known for his stunning black and white photographs and also a dramatic play between light and shadows, he says, "It is these restrictions with which a photographer must deal, and he can only overcome them by combining knowledge of him herself and of the subject in a manipulative dance of will within the interdependence of past and present. For instance, on the question of past and present, I can look for those things that remind me of the past, that cue me into the past. I can photograph and rephotograph the same thing. At that point, I will try to replicate the past somehow by being able to get more or less the thing at the same degree or the same level or the same lighting conditions. Generally, one tries to do it by making an image that represents all time. In other words, I have to look for that quality which is timeless in what I am doing. One also learns that instead of making drawings and calling from the past, one calls upon the past when one looks at the present. The photographer keeps shooting around the subject, through the subject, until he reaches what he considers the essence. But that essence is very subjective. This essence, this perception, is the product of one's total personality, one's total environment, and one's unique self. It is in this area where one can become creative, when he is able to bring a unique perspective to the subject or find something in it and is able to express the essence through the image. So you've named this project as a conversation across time. And so could you speak more on that and as that relates to memory too?
You mentioned the word nostalgia, and when I decided I wanted this work to be in black and white, I very consciously wanted to avoid nostalgia, but I think making the work timeless is something different. So when I'm photographing, I am doing my best to avoid cars, because if you see a car, it means the photograph can't have been made any earlier than the year the car, hit the streets. Or I try to avoid photographing people, not just because I want to photograph the architecture and really focus on that, but because dress and hairstyle, all of that tells you about a very specific moment in time. And Paul Williams's first buildings were built about 100 years ago. So we're looking at potentially 100 years of change in a particular building, 100 years of people living in a house and making changes to it, or keeping things the same, or finding things that have been changed and deciding to go back to the original version of it. There's all of this time in each of these places, and shooting in black and white is a way to kind of flatten some of that time out and unify all of these different things that are going on in these spaces. And it's important to me to approach these from the beginning as black and white photographs. So when I take a photograph, even though I'm experiencing it in color, I'm thinking of what it will look like in black and white. I'm a teacher, so sometimes a student will turn in a bunch of work, and there will be one black and white photograph in there, and I'll say, okay, why is that? And I know that the answer is because black and white can sometimes hide flaws in an image. So it's not, a lot of people think, oh, it's easy to make a good picture in black and white. But actually, I believe that you have to be very deliberate, that you have to be looking at light and shadow and really thinking about what the tones will look like in the final photograph, because you're not looking at all of the colors, you're only looking at black, white, and all of the tones of gray in between. So I'm always trying to make sure that I'm taking all of that into consideration. Did I answer all parts of that question? Did I miss something? I feel like I missed something.
I asked you so many, so you answered the part that needed to be answered.
Okay. You can, if you want to circle back, let me know.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. I want to go back to this. It's harder to take a black and white photo. And so looking at what's on the screen right now, and then thinking about the documentary that we saw, and then other photos that were shown in the presentations prior that were in color of a lot of the sites. I'm curious to think about what would have been lost and what would have been gained if we were seeing this show in color. And were there any structures you captured that you would have considered showing a color version of in a different context?
Very occasionally, I have shown color photographs, like someone, for example, who wanted to get historical designation for a building that I'd photographed, asked me for some pictures, and I thought, okay, in this context, it makes sense to use the color. And then there are also situations where the color is amazing, like in the Guardian Angel Cathedral. The color in those stained glass windows is phenomenal, and I'm sad to lose that in these photographs. But I also feel really strongly that the work needs to be consistent. So you're losing all of that color, you're losing some details about texture, but I do my best to preserve texture. But I hope overall that looking at the work, you benefit from the consistency and from being able to look at all of this different work from all of these different decades with all of these different things done to them, but designed by one person and then interpreted by another and presented in a consistent way.
I think that's your imprint then, right? Because if another photographer came in and they could be like, no, it needs to be about the color. And so you're really honoring like form and line and texture and also the stillness, like to think about the color photographs, they're loud. Like, I mean, there's no sound, but they feel loud in this way where there's this, the hushness allows you to think about the space differently. And so, and I guess we're gonna pivot now. So one of the noted achievements of Williams' career was designing Berkeley Square, which we've heard about a lot today, a subdivision in Las Vegas built by and for middle-class African Americans. And I'm thinking about the significance of possessing a home, which Brooke in her presentation made a point of saying that Williams called his structures not houses but homes. So thinking about the significance of possessing a home, of that long-standing American dream that exists across race and class lines, which feels less real, less feasible with each generation. And that's this desire of feeling rooted. And I'm also thinking about the recent call to retire the label homeless in favor of the term unhoused or houseless. And so I'm curious, what does home mean for you? And I know you kind of alluded to this home that you were building with your husband, and has your relation to it shifted over the course of documenting so many for this project?
So I did get into it a little bit earlier, but my family lost our house when I was 11, and then I lived with my aunt and uncle, I lived with my grandmother, I lived with a family friend, and there were several years where I wasn't with my parents. And eventually we all came back together, but then it was time for me to go to college, and I lived in something like, oh gosh, I don't even know how many dorm rooms and apartments I lived in New York in my late teens and early 20s. And then I met my husband, and we followed each other back and forth across the country for different graduate programs for years, and we had all of this student loan debt. And the idea of ever feeling rooted and ever owning a house felt just impossible. And then in December, we bought a house. And that's the house that I mentioned earlier. And for the first time, I feel like I can breathe. I feel like I can paint the walls or, install some really difficult art that would be difficult to remove, or I just feel, I feel relaxed for the first time. And a long time ago, when I thought about the possibility of owning a house, I sort of thought, anything would be fine. But through working on this project, I really learned how important beauty is to me, how important it is to not just have any roof over my head, but one that I felt a connection to as an artist. So we found this house that I think is beautiful. It's a 100-year-old craftsman house that needs quite a bit of work, but it's livable. We're managing. It's good. It's fantastic. But I don't know that I would have held out if I didn't have this Williams work. I think I would have just accepted anything and not thought about what was important to me and how much value I actually place on beauty and how much it means to me to be in beautiful places. So I learned a lot about myself through visiting all of these remarkable homes that Williams designed for other people.
Thank you. I was like tearing up and like looking at you as you were. So thinking about the home as this extension of self, and then also thinking about Williams's houses that he created homes for other people. Going back to the earlier question about the absence or presence of a body in your photographs, you've described these works as portraits of structures rather than as documentary architecture. So what are the nuances in that for you? And how do you enter spaces and treat the details and the whole structure as a subject rather than an object?
I think it goes back to some of what I was saying earlier about how I'm always trying to make sure that whenever possible, the camera is positioned in the way my body would be positioned, and that the perspective that's actually being recorded by the camera is close to my own perspective. So when I'm entering these spaces, the first thing you do when you walk into a room, of course, you look at the entire room. But I found that what I wanted to direct people to was smaller parts of the room, and was also, I don't know, I'm trying to think of a good way to express what I'm thinking.
Because if we're paralleling this portrait of self, right, if a room or a detail becomes me. So in looking at this column with like the Corinthian detail at the top, how does that become not just a column, which maybe an architect would describe it as a column, but as an artist or a photographer, it's like that's a limb. That is a support system that is lifting up a roof, which is then something greater than. So I guess it could just be that, but I think there's something poignant to think about your practice prior to this, where it was so much about you in spaces and capturing your body in these spaces, and then making this inanimate object live.
I mean, spaces aren't neutral. Spaces aren't blank slates. There is always time. There's always who is using the space and what it is for. And to some degree, the work strips some of that out. You know, we're not seeing an unmade bed or anything like that. I'm trying to both be respectful of whoever is inhabiting the spaces and make sure that I'm looking at the space from as many different perspectives as I can. And I don't know, I mean, are buildings kind of like bodies? Is that part of what you're asking? Yeah, I think that I might be interested in photographing a building the same way I'd be interested in photographing a person, and that is, maybe there's one photograph that is of a person's hands or of the lines around someone's eyes. There are all of these different details that make up a face, that make up a body. And I suppose I'm thinking of the buildings in the same way. And to me, that's more interesting than here's a photograph of this dining room, here's a photograph of this bedroom or this yard. By photographing the fronts of houses, so usually I'm photographing details like this, but I also make sure to get a really straightforward shot of the front of every house so that I can then put them in a grid and use that as a way to compare the architectural styles. So, for example, Berkeley Square, the houses are similar, and when you look at the grid, you can see those similarities, but you can also see the different things that people are doing. But then when I'm actually inside of someone's home, I don't want the overview. I want those little tiny pieces and details and the spider webs and the cracks in the walls and all of these things that time has done.
Thank you. Just a few more. So this is a quote from the architect and professor Mario Gooden. However, unlike sports, music, film, art, and design, which are cultural productions defined by representation, patterns of consumption, and in some cases mass production, architecture spatializes political, social, and historical relationships, as well as instrumentalizes subjectivities. It brackets place, time, and materiality to events in order to produce meaning and discourse. Therefore, architecture can neither be essentialized to race nor racial representations, a process that invariably results in stereotypes, commodification of identity, and a regime of visibility that reifies the dichotomies of otherness, white versus black, us versus them in American discourse. So getting to the heart, how did you navigate the politics of the Black body in entering, documenting, and creating spaces that you did not own, that historically and perhaps presently were told that they were not yours to belong to?
I am very conscious of the fact that I think I present as a non-threatening Black person. That means, you know, I'm a woman, I have a small body size, you know, I'm conscious of the fact that if I approach someone to ask to photograph their home, I might be having a different experience than a Black person who looks different or who speaks differently than I do might have. My mother, even though I've been working on this project for 6 years, the first time she saw a photograph of Paul Revere Williams was a few days ago when the New York Times article was published online. And the first thing that she said was, oh, he was light-skinned. So her first thought was about the way he had a degree of privilege when he was making his work. So we spent all of this time talking about the ways in which he was disadvantaged by default, but then he also had a certain amount of privilege as a light-skinned person, both in the Black community and in the world outside of that. So I'm thinking about that as I'm moving through these spaces. And I have a lot of practice being the only or one of the only people of color in white spaces. So I feel as though because I've had that practice, I can go into a stranger's home and I can focus on the work and I can really get down to it. We can talk about the history, we can talk about Paul Williams, and I can just get down to work. And I've had very few experiences where I felt really uncomfortable in someone's home. The place where I feel the most exposed is outside. So if I'm driving around a wealthy neighborhood, photographing the exteriors of Paul Williams' houses, there are times at which I can feel a next door post being written about me in real time, where I feel like people are looking at me as though I don't belong there. But I think for the most part, I've been very lucky in my experiences doing this work.
Thank you. And I want to continue with that because I hope you all are realizing this parallel of Janna's practice and Paul's practice of what they've had to navigate in order to get to this stage of their career. And so I'm thinking about Williams's learning to draw and write upside down for the comfortability of white clients who are not comfortable sitting next to him, and to be a master of many styles rather than one signature. And so how have you found over the course of your creative process that are you adapting and adjusting to carve out and claim your own space of navigating being both inside and outside?
I think there was a time early on in my practice where I felt that I had to navigate both sides, where I felt as though I had to make work for other people. And what I found was that people still felt outside of my work because it was very personal to me, and often I was included in it. My own body was included in it. And here I'm thinking I can make work that other people can relate to. And I had a few experiences where people said something like, you know, for example, I didn't get a grant that I applied for. And later I spoke to someone on the committee who said something like, you know, the work was so good and your proposal was really good, but I just couldn't connect to the work. And after that, I sort of thought, you know what, I just need to make this work for myself. And if other people relate to it, respond to it, fantastic. But I want to make the work that I'm interested in making. And it's okay if it doesn't resonate with other people. And then this project, as you said at the beginning, you know, it is Black history. It is the history of Los Angeles and the history of Nevada. It's architectural history, and it hits all of these different places, all of these different things that people might be interested in, and there are all of these different ways that people can approach the work and get into the work. So it has really changed my relationship to other people and my work. I don't know.
Thank you. Just have two more. You okay? Are we okay? Okay. And so to continue on that, I'm thinking metaphorically, but also literally, and you're capturing both interior and exterior spaces. And did learning about Williams' tactics and approaches to working in a field where he was an outsider alone inspire or influence you?
Just like I'm conscious of having a certain degree of privilege, I'm also conscious of having someone like Williams as an example, and having wonderful teachers who had experiences like mine and who made work that I could see myself in. So I have benefited from all of these years between when I was born and when Paul Williams was born in my own practice. So I'm always thinking about that, always very conscious of that. And can you repeat the last part, just so I can make sure that I actually answer it?
Did, in learning his tactics and approaches and being an outsider, did that influence or inspire you? I think you've...
Well, so I think someone mentioned earlier, a couple people mentioned the drawing upside down. And another thing that he would do is walk with his hands clasped behind his back, which meant that if he met a new person on a construction site or something like that, there was a moment where they could decide whether or not they wanted to shake his hand. And early on working on the project and hearing these stories, I was so angry for him, for all of the things that he had to do, for the ways where the situations where he had to make himself smaller in order to make this work that he was so brilliant at making. And I hope that I am not doing that. I don't feel like I'm doing that, but I'm always thinking about it. I'm always thinking, I don't know. That's a tough question. I need more time to think about that question.
It's ongoing, like seeds
Okay.
planted. Like in learning about him, it's just like you don't know necessarily the full impact someone can have until time. Yeah.
Okay.
So one final note, because I like to end on lifts. So often we may focus on what's in the shadows, the struggles, the hardships of a life. It's easier to remember the negative experiences rather than the positive. But in your collection, you have so many photographs of windows, of staircases, of doorways, of light, which for me, given the current state of the world, given the series was created before and during the pandemic, feels hopeful or hope-filled. That you in communion with Williams are creating, offering us a sense of possibility, of an uplift, of a potential to move, to change, to dream still. Can you speak to that?
What his work says to me is that the world is full of possibilities. I mean, if Paul Williams could be born in 1894 and begin his career in the late 19-teens and building his practice in the early 1920s, if he could do all of these things, then what can I do in this century? What will my children be able to do when they come of age and go out into the world and do whatever it is they're going to do? So when I think about his story, I actually think more about possibilities than I do think about those terrible stories that we hear about the things that he had to do to make himself palatable, to make himself acceptable, and to fit in with these people who might not have wanted to work with him or who couldn't really accept him for who he was. So I like to think of it as a project that is about those possibilities and that is about the sense of optimism that I feel when I think about what the future could be like.
Thank you. So I'm gonna, before we open things up for questions, I'd like to close by really centering and celebrating this moment around you, Janna, as well as the incredible curator, Carmen Beals, with a quote from Bell Hooks' essay, Home Place, A Site of Resistance. and how you both have brought new life and urgency into ensuring and furthering the legacy, preservation, and reverency towards the homes, houses, and structures created by Paul Revere Williams. I speak of this journey as leading to my grandmother's house, even though our grandfather lived there too. In our young minds, houses belong to women, were their special domain, not as property, but as places where all that truly mattered in life took place. The warmth and shelter, the warmth and comfort of shelter, the feeding of our bodies, the nurturing of our souls. There we learned dignity, integrity of being. There we learned to have faith. The folks who made this life possible, who were our primary guides and teachers, were Black women. Thank you both. And thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janna and Daonne. Beautiful. At this time, we will take questions from the audience. Please hold your question until we can get a microphone to you so that we can capture your question for the recording. If you have a question for one of our earlier presenters that are still here with us right now, please indicate who you would like to ask, and we will get a mic to them as well. Are there any questions? Okay.
Actually, I have a question just about the kind of camera equipment you used.
Oh no, I hate the camera question.
And you know, you don't have to give me a technical answer, but I'm just curious, is it digital, is it film? You know, do you use filters, you know?
It is digital. As much as I love film, the way it looks, it is so expensive to work with. And as I said, I've been working on this for 6 years. So I've made thousands of photographs. And working digitally makes the process not only less expensive, but it makes actually organizing things significantly easier.
I have a question for Dr. Barber, if she's still here. Do you have an idea of what the square foot cost of the homes in the Las Vegas area that were done for BMI, just relative to construction today?
Yes, Claytee.
I have no idea. It was a government project, so the federal government paid for those structures at Carver Park, and they were supposed to only have been temporary. So I have no idea, have never seen that in any of the research.
Okay.
All right.
A question for Professor White from UNLV. I was intrigued by the discussion of the middle-class housing that Williams designed, and we looked at some detail about his high-end commissions. How did he maintain, have you been in the interior of the Berkeley Square houses, how did he maintain his architectural integrity but scale it down to fit the budget of middle-class people?
So, you know, I don't know if you're aware of this, but he wrote 2 books. And those 2 books were about the small home. And that was his research that he put together so that middle class, working class people could also enjoy the kinds of genius that he put on paper. So, yes, he did a lot of the elegant locations, especially in Los Angeles and what you can see here in Reno. But he was also known for the small home.
Have you been in the interior of some of these Berkeley Square homes?
Yes.
Have they preserved the interior design?
So yes, most people have preserved the interior, and some of them have added, a lot of them have enclosed that open garage, A lot of them have added a room, but the original design of the house in most cases is still there. And so I interviewed the person who is the president of the Homeowners Association in Berkeley Square, and I did the interview in her house. So yes, and even her street is maintained in a way that other streets in the neighborhood have sort of allowed things to go astray, but not Ruth. Ruth kept everything pristine. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, one more question. If anyone,
I think we had those books back there too. Did you want to hold those?
Claire, there's one last question over here. And those are the books. They're holding the books in the back. Yes.
This question is for any of you. Do we know whether or not Paul R. Williams collaborated with any of the other famed architects like Frank Lloyd Wright? Do we know whether or not they collaborated? He collaborated with them.
He did quite a few projects with other architects, and the best person to ask about that would be Brooke, who we don't have here in the room with us. But especially in Southern California, he worked with many different architects on many different kinds of projects.
And he even worked with a couple of architects in Las Vegas as well. I just did not give them their props. He worked with one on the, thank you. He worked with one other architect building the racetrack, that building at the racetrack. And he worked with another architect when he did the Nevada, the Royal Nevada. Yes, and I can get those names to you. I do have those in my notes. I just didn't give them their credits.
And the Steamboat Springs renderings as well, right, Alicia? Okay.
Right, the renderings for the Steamboat Springs project, and he had actually went on to work with that architect on several build designs, including some medical-related buildings.
Thank you all to our presenters today. A recording of today's program, along with the original essays and all of Janna's photographs, will live permanently on a website housed by the Nevada Museum of Art. I encourage you to watch it and to watch for new research discoveries to appear there as they are uncovered. Before we close, I would like to ask Mr. Hardaway of Our Story Incorporated to provide reflections and closing remarks. Our Story Incorporated is a nonprofit 501c3 organization which strives to seek out, collect, preserve, and exhibit the contributions, heritage, and culture of people who their experiences are not well represented in Northern Nevada history. This nonprofit organization provides opportunity for information for students and scholars to study what is not normally offered in public or private school classrooms. Mr. Hardaway?
Good afternoon. My name is George Hardaway, and I am on the board with Our Story, Inc. On behalf of our founders, Kenny Dalton and Demetrius Dalton, Our Story, it is a tremendous, tremendous honor to partner with the Northern Nevada Museum of Arts and the architectural legacy of Paul Revere Williams project. I am just totally enthused and motivated and just really happy to have these 2 days of being educated. I, as a retired history teacher at TMCC and at the Washoe County School District, teaching about Paul R. Williams' legacy, if I would have had Janna's material, if I would have had Alicia's material back in the 70s and 80s, I tell you, my students would have been totally fulfilled in the knowledge of this individual. I was deprived of having this information back in those days. And I tell you, I feel that now I can go on and share this information with my grandkids because they are of high school and middle school age, and they will definitely benefit from this knowledge that I received the last 2 days here with this project. And thank God for the Northern Nevada Museum of Arts. I thank you for Our Story being a partner and having a relationship over these many years with this institution. Our Story, Inc. mission is to teach, share, and present the stories of the unsung African-American pioneers and settlers in Northern Nevada, yesterday and today. For instance, Paul Revere is phenomenal. His history is phenomenal. But not only Paul Revere's history, but we have, of course, back in the 1800s, a person by the name of Ben Palmer. Ben Palmer is a rancher that was in Moxville down in Carson Valley, and he was one of the largest paying taxpayers in Nevada. A millionaire, an African American, had a ranch there that covered all of that area down in Moxville. Now, Jack Johnson's, most of you have heard of Jack Johnson. How about Alice Smith? Alice Smith, there's a school out in Golden Valley, an elementary school named for Alice Smith, who was the first president of the NAACP here in Northern Nevada. She came here in 1945 and organized the Reno Sparks NAACP on the local level. And Jim Beckworth, how many of you have heard of Beckworth Pass, Sierra Pass, Highway 70, Hallelujah Junction? Of course, we know that Jim Beckworth found a northern route into California. And so these are some of the individuals that we should know. I want to tell you one other individual, and that is Jacob Dodson, John C. Fremont. How many of you heard of John C. Fremont? The Fremont Cannon. I'm a former football player at the University of Nevada. I played football. And guess what? We fought for that cannon with UNLV many years. You know, that cannon is a treasure. And I tell you, what's the history behind it? How many of those football players or how many of those coaches know about Jacob Dodson, who, of course, was with John Fremont at Fort Churchill? I don't know. So please join us in being educated in this regard, because I tell you, it is so profound to have this knowledge. Education is the key. And all these 40 plus years of me at TMCC and at the Washoe County School District trying to push this is ongoing. We will educate this community as well as these United States of America, because we're living in trying times today. It is so important that we get this. We have to get it. We either learn to live together as brothers and sisters, or we should perish as fools. Nobody cares how much you know until they know how much you care. We gotta care about our community. We gotta care about all mankind. It is so vitally important. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hardaway, for that powerful conclusion. And I think I speak for all of us in that we are so pleased to have the honor of increasing Williams' visibility as an architect, encouraging the next generation to explore the fields of art and architecture. And with that, this program is concluded, and please join us for lunch. Thank you, and thank you. Do you have anything that you would like to add, David? Fabulous. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Thank you.